The chosen one. The storm raged inside you, a storm no one could see. It was not made of wind or thunder, but of questions that refused to sleep. You kept asking why you felt different, why even in the loudest rooms, silence followed you like a shadow. You tried to belong, but the world's rhythm never matched the quiet pulse inside your chest. Every step felt like walking on unseen glass, fragile, uncertain, yet strangely purposeful. You could not explain it, but something sacred moved beneath your confusion, whispering, not in words, but in presence. It said, you were not made to fit in, you were made to awaken. At first, you resisted. You wanted a normal life, predictable and safe. You wanted laughter without depth, success without sacrifice. But the whisper grew louder, and soon you realized it was not a dream. It was a calling. You tried to silence it. You drowned it with noise, with the chase for approval, with love that asked you to shrink, and work that made you forget. But when night came, when the lights dimmed, and the world stopped pretending, the truth returned. It looked at you and asked, will you answer? The weight of difference. You have always felt it, the quiet distance between you and others. Not because you were cold, but because your warmth revealed what others wanted to hide. Toxic people felt uneasy near you. Their laughter would fade, their smiles would tremble, and their eyes would turn away. You thought it was rejection, but it was recognition. The light within you exposed the shadows around them. It was not your fault, it was your essence. The chosen never blend in, because their energy unmasks illusion. And so, life began to separate you. One by one, people you thought would stay, left. Some spoke against you. Some simply disappeared. You cried. You questioned. You begged for clarity. But heaven whispered again, I am not punishing you. I am positioning you. The silent trial. There were nights when even faith seemed cruel. You spoke to the sky, but it said nothing. You looked for signs, and all you found was emptiness. You wondered if maybe you were wrong, if all this talk of divine purpose was just a beautiful lie you told yourself to survive loneliness. But that silence was not absence, it was initiation. The chosen ones are not proven in miracles, they are forged in the waiting. You were being trained to see without sight, to trust without evidence, to believe when everything around you mocked the very idea of faith. The divine was not far. It was hidden in your pain, watching to see if you would still believe when no one applauded you, when every door stayed closed, when every prayer seemed unanswered. This is the unseen test, the moment that separates those who seek comfort from those who seek purpose. The voice in the wilderness. You began to notice strange patterns. People left right before something broke through. Doors closed moments before greater ones opened. Every loss carried a secret timing, as if an invisible hand rearranged your path to protect you from things you begged for but were not ready to hold. At first, you called it coincidence, but deep down, you knew better. There were too many accidents that shaped your survival, too many impossible rescues that arrived the second before collapse. You realized that perhaps your life was not random, it was orchestrated. And when that thought settled into your soul, something shifted. The pain did not vanish, but it gained meaning. You began to see that rejection was redirection, that solitude was not isolation, but sacred preparation. Still, the struggle continued, because the moment you accept the call, darkness takes notice. The battle within. You woke one morning and felt the air around you change. Not physically, but spiritually. You sensed resistance. Everything that could go wrong began to crumble. Projects failed. Friends misunderstood. Your peace shattered under the weight of invisible warfare. It was not bad luck. It was alignment. When light begins to rise within someone, shadows panic. They strike not because you are weak, but because you are waking up. Every chosen soul must face the storm that comes before the revelation. It is the soul's rite of passage, the testing ground between calling and confirmation. And though you felt unworthy, though you questioned if you had misheard the voice, something deeper refused to die. Beneath every fear, beneath every doubt, there remained a quiet defiance, a belief that somehow all this suffering meant something. The revelation of separation. People around you started to notice the shift. Some admired it, others envied it. Without explanation, you began to outgrow conversations, habits, even dreams that once defined you. What once satisfied you now felt small. The divine was expanding your spirit beyond the dimensions of your past, But expansion requires separation. Just as gold is purified by fire, your heart was being refined by loss. You thought you were losing everything. In truth, you were being stripped for flight. This is where most turn back at the edge of transformation, when faith burns and logic fails. But you, even trembling, continued forward, because deep down, you knew. The storm was not sent to destroy you, but to reveal you. The moment of awakening, and then, without warning, it happened. The silence cracked. The same pain that once paralyzed you began to speak. Every unanswered question started to echo with purpose. You looked back and saw that what you thought was punishment was protection. Every goodbye was grace. Every closed door was divine strategy. You realized you were never abandoned. You were being guided all along, and in that realization, tears fell, not from sorrow, but from awakening. For the first time, you understood what it meant to be chosen, not chosen for comfort, but for calling. Not chosen to escape pain, but to transform through it. Your spirit whispered what words could not hold. This is why you never fit in. You were never meant to. The world will try to label you, to silence you, to make you question your worth. But remember this, your light irritates only those still hiding in darkness. Do not shrink. You were born to disrupt the ordinary. And as you stand at the edge of your purpose, let this truth settle into your bones. You were not sent here to blend in. You were sent here to break patterns, to awaken souls, to remind the world that faith is not a belief, it is a revolution. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe, because what comes next will demand your courage, your endurance, and your unwavering trust. For the path of the chosen has just begun. The chosen one, the silence after revelation is never peace. It is preparation. You thought that once you understood your calling, the storms would calm, that the world would make sense again. But instead, everything became heavier, sharper, almost unbearable. The light that woke you up now burned you from within. You began to notice what others could not see. The shift in a friend's tone, the unseen motives behind kind words, the unease in places where spirits clashed. You wished you could unsee it all. You wished you could go back to being ordinary, blind, and safe. But chosen souls do not get to go back. Once your eyes open, they never close again. The gift of divine sight is not gentle. It comes wrapped in confusion, tied with threads of loneliness. You do not simply see the world, you feel its weight. Every hidden lie, every unspoken pain, every false smile. You sense it before it unfolds. And sometimes you know things you cannot explain. That is the burden of perception, the cost of spiritual sensitivity, the vision and the doubt. One night, the dreams began to change. They were no longer random images of forgotten places, they carried meaning. You saw faces you had not met, places you had not visited, and yet your spirit recognized them. Some of those dreams came true. Others warned you of what was coming. But the strange thing was, the more you saw, the less people believed you. You shared your visions, and they called you dramatic. You warned them of storms, and they laughed until the winds came. And in their laughter, you felt a deeper ache, not because they doubted you, but because you began to doubt yourself. You questioned if these visions were divine or delusion. You wondered if your gift was a curse disguised as purpose. Faith became fragile. You wanted proof, signs, something solid to hold on to. But heaven remained quiet, watching, measuring how you would carry this unseen weight, because every chosen one must walk through the wilderness of disbelief. Before your voice can carry power, it must first learn silence. Before your words can guide others, you must learn what it means to be unheard. The burden of knowing. There are days when you feel everything too deeply. The room's tension, the sadness in someone's eyes, the exhaustion behind a stranger's smile. It overwhelms you until you want to shut it off, to stop feeling altogether. But that is not your punishment, it is your instrument. The chosen are not called to be comfortable, they are called to be compassionate. You are meant to feel what others ignore, to see what others pretend not to. That is how divine empathy works. It breaks you open so that light can pour through your cracks. Still, this gift isolates you. People do not understand your silence. They call it coldness, but it is protection. They cannot comprehend that your stillness is not emptiness, but a shield forged from too much awareness. And yet, in this isolation, something sacred happens. The same loneliness that once felt like exile begins to transform into intimacy with God, with your purpose, with the deeper rhythms of existence. You start to sense that the solitude you feared was actually a sanctuary being built around your soul, the mirror of rejection. The more aligned you become, the more you are misunderstood. It seems unfair, almost cruel, that truth attracts so much opposition. You try to speak gently, but your words still pierce. You remain silent, yet your presence alone stirs reactions you cannot control. People leave before you explain. Some twist your intentions, others invent stories to justify their discomfort. And each time, you bleed quietly, wondering why love must hurt this much. But here lies the paradox. Rejection is not evidence of your failure, it is confirmation of your light. Every chosen one must be rejected before being revealed. The world cannot recognize what threatens its illusion. Remember Joseph, thrown into a pit by his brothers not because of his arrogance, but because of his anointing. Remember Daniel, hated not for his actions, but for his integrity. The chosen have always walked alone, before they walked in glory. Your path mirrors theirs, not to punish you, but to prove you. The crisis of faith. Then came the breaking point. One night, you fell to your knees and whispered, "If I am chosen, why do I feel forsaken?" It was not blasphemy, it was honesty, and heaven listens more to honest pain than to hollow praise. You wept not because you lost faith, but because faith had become too heavy to carry alone. In that moment of collapse, something shifted in the unseen. For faith does not die when you question it is reborn. Doubt is not your enemy, it is your crucible. It strips away false beliefs until all that remains is raw trust. You realize that believing does not always mean feeling certain. Sometimes it means standing in the dark and saying, "I still choose to believe," even when your voice trembles. That is what makes you chosen, not perfection, but persistence. The unseen war, the attacks intensified, dreams turned into spiritual battles, faces from the past reappeared to tempt or test you. The same people who once ignored you began speaking against you. It was as if unseen forces conspired to break your spirit before destiny could shape it. But what they did not know is that every blow only awakened more strength. Pain taught you resilience. Betrayal sharpened your discernment. Isolation deepened your intimacy with the divine. You began to understand that opposition is not proof you are off path, it is proof you are on it. The darker the resistance, the brighter the mission behind it. And slowly, the fear that once paralyzed you began to lose its grip. You stopped begging for things to get easier. You started praying for the strength to endure. That shift changed everything, because when the chosen stop running from fire and start walking through it, the flames no longer destroy, they refine. The glimpse of power. There was a morning when you woke up, different. The same world greeted you, but you saw it with new eyes. What used to hurt, now revealed purpose. What used to scare you, now taught you. You realized you were not cursed with sensitivity, you were entrusted with awareness. And with that awareness came power. The ability to sense when something was wrong before it happened. The gift to comfort others with words that felt too perfectly timed to be coincidence. The quiet knowing that when your heart stirred, heaven was speaking. You had entered a new phase of your calling, not easier, but clearer. You no longer needed everyone to understand you. You simply needed to remain aligned. Because the chosen are not validated by approval, they are affirmed by obedience. The turning of the spirit. That night, as you looked at the sky, you realized something profound. You were no longer afraid of being misunderstood. The same solitude that once wounded you now felt sacred. You began to see isolation not as rejection, but as refinement. Every chosen soul must walk alone long enough to hear only one voice, the voice that truly matters. And when that voice finally spoke again, it did not thunder. It whispered. It said, "You were never meant to fit in, because you were meant to stand out." You exhaled, and for the first time in years, peace did not feel foreign. You finally understood that your difference was not a defect. It was design. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment, but the story does not end here. Because now that you see, the question is, will you dare to act on what you know? For in the next chapter, the light within you will be tested against the darkness around you, and only those who stand firm in their purpose will rise from the fire reborn. The chosen one. The air grew heavier. The silence that once felt sacred now felt suffocating. You had learned to walk alone, to trust the unseen, but you did not know that the next test would come from the eyes of others. The same people who once praised your light would now fear it. At first, you thought it was misunderstanding. You believed that if you just explained yourself better, if you softened your words, they would see your heart. But no amount of explanation can comfort those who feel convicted by your existence. You did not seek conflict. You did not provoke it. Yet everywhere you went, something seemed to stir. Whispers followed you. Judgment shadowed you. And the peace you tried to carry was met with quiet resistance. And when you asked heaven why, the answer came like thunder through the soul. Because truth will always disturb what feeds on illusion. The mirror of truth, your very presence began to challenge people. It was not your words that offended them, it was your clarity. You stood in rooms built on lies, and your silence became a mirror. People looked into your stillness and saw the parts of themselves they had buried. That is why their anger was so fierce. You did not attack them, you exposed them. This is what few understand about being chosen. It is not about superiority, it is about responsibility. Your energy reveals what others hide, and the world rarely forgives exposure. The prophets faced it, the saints endured it, and now it was your turn to stand in the fire of accusation without letting bitterness consume you. You tried to shrink, to hide your glow under quiet humility, but the light refused to dim. The more you tried to disappear, the more visible you became. Because when God chooses you, no amount of silence can make heaven forget your name. The trial of perception, then came the betrayal. A friend's word twisted, a colleague's smile turned into sabotage. You watched rumors spread like wildfire, and for the first time, you questioned not just others, but yourself. Maybe they were right. Maybe you were too intense, too spiritual, too strange. Maybe the calling you felt was only imagination. Doubt moved through you like smoke, filling every corner of your faith. You wanted to give up. You wanted to go back to a simpler life where belief did not burn so fiercely. But something inside whispered, "Stay in the fire." You did not understand then. But the flame was not meant to destroy it, was meant to purify. The accusations were not punishment, they were preparation. Every misunderstanding stripped away another layer of ego, leaving only what was eternal. That is how the chosen are made, not by applause, but by endurance, the weight of integrity. You could have fought back. You could have defended yourself, proven your innocence, and silenced your critics. But something deeper held you still. You remembered Daniel betrayed by those who envied his light, thrown into the lion's den not for wrongdoing, but for righteousness. You saw yourself in his silence. Daniel did not fight for approval. He did not argue with the jealous. He trusted that integrity would speak when words failed. So you remained quiet. You let the world misunderstand, because you knew that divine vindication takes time. And in that stillness, something remarkable happened. Peace returned not because the world changed, but because you did. You no longer sought to be understood. You sought only to remain true, the raw in the darkness. But silence has its own price. The isolation grew deeper, and the night grew long. You felt surrounded not by lions of flesh, but of fear. Voices inside your mind began to whisper, "You are forgotten. You are alone. You are finished." You almost believed them, until, in the depth of that night, something ancient stirred within you. It was the same voice that called you at the beginning, but now it spoke not in words, but in fire. It said, "You were never thrown into the den to die. You were sent there to show the lions who you are." And suddenly, what once terrified you became your altar. You stood not as a victim, but as a vessel. Every roar of doubt became an echo of your faith. You realized that survival was not the miracle peace in the midst of danger was. The lions were still there, but they no longer scared you. They bowed to the authority of the one who walks with divine purpose. The turning of shadows. The next morning came, and with it, silence again, but not the same silence as before. This one was holy. The world that once accused you now watched in confusion as you rose from the fire unharmed. People who had doubted you began to whisper again, but this time with awe. They did not understand how you endured without hatred, how you stayed calm when everything conspired to break you. They did not know that your peace was not denial, it was alignment. When heaven stands beside you, you do not need to prove anything. This is the mystery of divine justice. It does not arrive through noise, but through undeniable peace. The same mouths that once cursed you will one day say, there was something different about them. The test of power, but with vindication comes a new temptation, the desire for recognition. After being overlooked and doubted for so long, Part of you wants the world to finally see. You crave to be acknowledged, to be understood, yet the voice within reminds you, do not seek the crown too early. It will crush you before it fits. The chosen are not defined by praise, but by purpose. Your power is not meant for display, it is meant for service. You were not called to shine so the world sees you. You were called to shine so the world sees God through you. You take a deep breath, let go of the need to prove, and surrender again to the unseen rhythm that has always guided your steps. The beginning of authority. As you walk away from the den, you notice something subtle. The fear that once followed you now fades. The same eyes that once judged you now look for your guidance. Without asking for it, you have become a pillar of peace in chaos, a light for those who doubted your flame. You understand now that leadership in the divine sense is not about control, it is about endurance. You do not rise by demanding attention, but by remaining faithful when no one watches. Every scar, every sleepless night, every unanswered prayer has built within you a quiet authority, the kind that cannot be taken, only earned. And as you stand in that awareness, you feel the whisper again. You survived not to boast, but to serve. You endured not to rise above others, but to lift them. The storm is not over. It has simply changed shape. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe, because the next chapter is where the chosen one must confront the greatest enemy, not the world outside, but the doubt that still lives within. The battle between destiny and desire is about to begin. The chosen one, you thought the storm was behind you. You had faced the fire, survived the lions, and stood untouched when the world expected you to fall. But the truth of every chosen soul is this: the fiercest battle never comes from outside. It comes from within. The silence that once felt sacred began to twist again into something darker. You could still hear the voice of purpose, but now another voice rose beside it. Quieter, colder, more familiar. It asked questions that cut deep. What if you were not chosen at all? What if this is all in your head? What if everything you've endured was for nothing? You tried to pray louder, to drown it out, but the voice knew every corner of your doubt. It did not shout, it whispered, and sometimes it sounded exactly like you. The war of the mirrors. You looked at your reflection one morning and did not recognize what stared back. There were the same eyes, the same face, but behind them lived exhaustion, the kind that no rest could cure. You had given so much, trusted so deeply, and still the world felt heavy. You asked yourself, if I have come this far and still feel lost, what was the point? The chosen ones often mistake the halfway point for the end. They think the silence means abandonment, when, in truth, it means transformation. But transformation is not beautiful, it is violent. It tears away the versions of you that cannot carry what is next. Your spirit was shedding its skin, and you mistook it for death. The temptation of comfort. There were moments when you wanted to return to the old life, the predictable, the safe, the known. You missed the numbness that once protected you from feeling too much. You envied those who lived without depth, whose hearts were never torn between heaven's will and human desire. You began to wonder if purpose was worth this price. That is when the world offered you escape. Opportunities arose, ones that promised peace but required compromise. Paths that seemed easier, lighter, more appealing. They whispered, just stop fighting. Just settle. You've already done enough. It was the same temptation that visited every soul on the edge of destiny, the offer of ease in exchange for essence. You almost accepted. You almost let go. But something deep inside refused. You realized that comfort could never replace calling, because peace without purpose is only disguised decay. The return of the voice. Days turned to weeks, and the divine voice grew faint. You thought you had lost it forever. You stopped praying. You stopped seeking. You simply existed, breathing, surviving, pretending. And then, one night, as the moonlight spilled through your window, you felt it again. Not as a voice, but as a vibration. Not in your mind, but in your bones. It said nothing new, only reminded you of what you already knew. I never left. You broke down, not in despair, but in relief. The tears that fell were not from pain, they were from remembering. For even when you stop reaching, heaven keeps holding. The divine does not abandon the chosen, it waits until you are quiet enough to hear again. The confrontation, when the voice returned, it did not bring comfort. It brought truth. It showed you the parts of yourself you still refused to face, the pride hidden behind humility, the fear disguised as wisdom, the resentment buried under patience. You saw how even your goodness had been tainted by the desire to be seen as pure, and in that confrontation, something shattered. You realized that the enemy you had been fighting all along was not the world, not the critics, not the pain. It was your own resistance to change. That night, you stopped praying for the storm to end. You prayed for the courage to face what the storm revealed, and that changed everything. The desert of reflection, life slowed to a crawl. Nothing moved forward, yet nothing broke apart either. It was as if time had paused to watch you rebuild yourself. You walked through the days, feeling invisible, forgotten, stripped of identity. But the desert is not the place of punishment, it is the birthplace of prophets. In the stillness, you learned to listen beyond noise, to see beyond form. You began to understand that divine silence is not absence, it is alignment. It is the universe holding its breath as you become something new. Slowly, the anger softened, the fear began to fade, and in their place, a strange calm emerged, not the calm of answers, but the calm of surrender. You no longer needed to know how everything would unfold, you simply trusted that it would. The revelation of duality. Then came a revelation so profound it left you trembling. Light does not destroy darkness, it transforms it. You saw that the shadow within you was not an enemy, but a teacher. It had kept you grounded, reminding you of your humanity, while your spirit soared toward the divine. The lesson was brutal but beautiful. You are both the wound and the healer, both the storm and the calm, both the seeker and the found. To reject your darkness is to reject the half of you that gives light its meaning. You stood there, finally whole, not perfect, not pure, but real. And for the first time, you felt no need to prove anything. You simply were. The quiet rebirth. When dawn came, it was not with thunder or revelation. It came with stillness. You opened your eyes and felt peace, not the kind you fight for, but the kind that arrives when you stop fighting. You realized that you no longer sought signs, because your very existence had become one. The divine did not need to speak through dreams or numbers anymore. It spoke through your heartbeat, through the rhythm of your surrender. You understood now that being chosen was never about being flawless. It was about being faithful, even when your faith felt fragile. And as the first light touched your face, you whispered, "I am both the storm and the sun that follows." The whisper returned, almost like an echo. Now you understand. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment. But this awakening is not the end. For once you make peace with the shadow within, destiny will summon you to stand where fear once ruled, to walk not just in awareness, but in authority. For the next chapter is the test of manifestation, the moment when the unseen becomes real, and your inner truth must face the world. The chosen one. You rose from the silence not as the same soul who entered it. Something within you had shifted, an invisible weight lifted, an invisible authority awakened. The world looked the same, yet it did not feel the same. The air carried new meaning, every sound, every step, every breath, humming with divine rhythm. You were no longer the seeker, you had become the vessel. But power does not arrive with glory, it comes with gravity. It does not lift you up to escape the world, it roots you deeper within it. You began to realize that the greatest miracle was not what changed around you, it was what changed inside you. For the first time, your thoughts carried light, and your words carried weight. You noticed how even your silence began to shift atmospheres. People who once ignored you now leaned in, doors that were sealed began to move. And yet, with every new opening came new resistance, because when the chosen rise, shadows tremble. The weight of manifestation, the dreams that once felt distant, began to stir in the edges of reality. Visions that you dismissed as imagination started aligning with events, faces, opportunities. The impossible began to move closer, and it terrified you more than failure ever did. You whispered, "Is this really happening?" And the answer came not as a voice, but as confirmation, small moments stitched together by divine design. A meeting you did not plan, a message that arrived too perfectly timed to be chance, a path that appeared the moment you chose to take a step. This is what it means to walk in alignment, not to control, but to cooperate with the unseen, to realize that destiny is not forced, it is flowed. But with manifestation comes the test of motive. The universe began to ask you not what do you want, But why do you want it? And that question cut deeper than any rejection. The battle of intention. You started to see how even good desires can carry hidden shadows. A part of you still longed for recognition, for proof that you were not forgotten, for validation that your pain had a purpose. But power without purity becomes corruption disguised as calling. You faced the subtle temptation to use your light for control, to prove wrong those who doubted you. You imagined the satisfaction of being seen, of being right, and for a moment, pride whispered that it would be justice. But then the voice returned, quiet and piercing. If you use your light to win, you lose the reason you were given it. You realize that divine power cannot be used, it must be served through. The moment you claim ownership of it, it fades. The chosen are not masters of light, they are carriers of it. That night, you fell to your knees again, not in defeat, but in surrender. You whispered, "Let my power never exceed my humility." And heaven listened, the restoration of authority. As days unfolded, you began to move differently, not faster, not louder, but clearer. People noticed. Some came seeking advice, others simply drawn to your presence without knowing why. They said things like, "You have peace in your eyes," or "There's something about your voice." You did not boast. You smiled gently, for you knew that it was never about you, it was the presence flowing through you. Authority is not granted through title or recognition, it is born in surrender. It is the quiet confidence of one who has wrestled with doubt and found faith still standing. You had not escaped the wilderness, you had become the voice that once guided you through it, the echo of prayer. You began to notice something extraordinary. When you prayed, things moved. Not always immediately, not always visibly, but undeniably. A door would open, a conflict would dissolve, someone would call at the perfect moment. It wasn't coincidence, it was resonance. Prayer had become more than words, it was vibration, alignment, agreement with a divine frequency. You no longer prayed to be heard, you prayed to harmonize. Sometimes you would simply whisper, "Let your will unfold through me," and the atmosphere would shift. You could feel unseen patterns rearranging themselves. You realized that you were no longer asking God to move. You were learning how to move with Him. This was the awakening of true authority, not commanding reality, but conversing with it. The return of the world. But as your power grew, so did the world's pull. People from your past began to return, some with apologies, others with curiosity, a few with hidden intentions. You faced the old voices again, temptations of comfort, flattery, distractions, dressed as opportunities. The same tests, just wearing finer clothes. You recognized them now. You had seen their pattern before. Every time a chosen one ascends, the old world sends its siren call, "Come back." You can have the light and still live as before, but you knew better. The light cannot coexist with what once dimmed it. So you smiled, not in pride but in peace, and whispered, "I have already died to who I was." And one by one, the old attachments faded not by force, but by frequency. You simply no longer matched their vibration. The circle of divine timing. Then came the moment you never expected, the return of the very thing you once prayed for. The dream that had shattered long ago. It came back, but different, gentler, purified by time. You hesitated. You wondered if it was a test or a blessing. But this time, you were not desperate. You were discerning. You asked not, "Is this what I want?" but "Does this align with who I have become?" And that single question changed everything. Because the chosen do not chase what is meant for them, they prepare for it. You realize that divine timing is not about waiting for the world to change, it is about becoming the person who can carry what you once asked for. And in that realization, your waiting turned to worship. The new light. There came a morning when you stood at the edge of a hill, the world still asleep below. The first light of dawn brushed against your face. You closed your eyes and breathed deeply. You no longer needed signs or visions or confirmations. You were the sign. Everything you had lost had served to carve the vessel you had become. Every fire, every betrayal, every lonely night was not wasted. It was woven. You finally understood what it meant to be chosen. Not to be perfect, not to be powerful, but to be purified until your very existence became prayer. And as the wind moved through you, it whispered the same truth that began this journey. You were never called to survive. You were called to transform. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe, because now the world begins to shift around you. and the light you carry will be tested once more, not by fire, not by darkness, but by destiny itself. For in the next chapter, the chosen one must face the final alignment, where faith meets fulfillment, and what was once invisible becomes undeniable. The chosen one, you have walked through the silence and the storm. You have been misunderstood, purified, and refined by both light and shadow. You have faced the lions, you have wrestled with doubt, and you have learned the language of surrender. Now the air feels different. The world itself seems to hold its breath. You know it before it happens. This is the threshold, the final alignment. Destiny does not arrive with noise. It comes quietly, like dawn slipping across the horizon. It does not ask for permission. It waits for readiness. And now, after everything, you are ready, not because you are fearless, but because you have made peace with fear. What once felt like chaos now feels like rhythm. You can sense divine order hidden beneath every coincidence. You are no longer the seeker looking for signs. You are the sign that others are waiting for. The time of becoming has ended. The time of embodiment has begun. The test of choice. Every chosen one must face a final decision, the one that separates purpose from comfort. It will not look like temptation. It will look like opportunity. It will come wrapped in everything you ever asked for, but it will carry a cost your spirit cannot afford. You will stand before two paths, one wide and bright, offering recognition and ease, the other narrow and uncertain, demanding faith without guarantee. You will hear two voices. One will say, "You have earned your rest." The other will whisper, "The journey is not complete." In that moment, every wound will ache again, every old fear will awaken, and every doubt you buried will rise to the surface. You will question everything you have endured. You will wonder if this endless faith was worth the solitude it required. And yet, deep within, another presence will stir the same voice that once called you from the storm. It will not command. It will not shout. It will simply remind you, you were never chosen for comfort. You were chosen for impact, the fire of decision. You stand before the unseen gate. The air hums with tension. It feels like every heartbeat carries eternity inside it. You know that stepping forward means surrendering control once again. You know that obedience might cost you what the world calls success. You close your eyes. For a moment, the memories rush back, the nights of silence, the tears that became prayers, the pain that became power. You remember every time you thought you were finished, and how every ending became a beginning. You take a breath and whisper, "Even if I lose everything, I will not lose myself." The gate opens not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped trying to. The divine does not need your struggle, it needs your surrender. And in that stillness, you step through. The veil lifts. On the other side, there is no thunder, no explosion of light, just clarity. You see the world as it truly is, woven together by invisible grace. You realize that every rejection, every detour, every delay was not against you, it was for you. The people who left were never meant to stay. The doors that closed were never your destination. The prayers that went unanswered were the ones that would have broken you if granted too soon. It all makes sense now, not in logic, but in alignment. You look around and see how the threads connect, how the pain carried purpose, how the silence became symphony. You see that the divine never needed your perfection, it only ever wanted your presence. You smile through tears, whispering, "It was never random. It was revelation." The mantle of light. The chosen ones are not crowned in gold, they are clothed in awareness. You now carry what cannot be taken, what cannot be bought. Your energy itself has become a message. Your presence, a reminder that light does not need to shout to be seen. You walk through crowds unnoticed, yet the atmosphere changes wherever you go. You do not need to preach. Your peace speaks louder than words. Children still gaze at you in wonder. Animals still approach without fear. Even strangers sense something they cannot explain. It is not charisma, it is clarity. You have become a living reflection of divine alignment. This is the true mark of the chosen, not that you are admired, but that you awaken others simply by existing. The return of the call. Then, as it began, the voice returns. But now, it sounds different. It no longer speaks from above. It speaks from within. It says, "You have become what I sent you to seek." You realize that the calling was never about arriving somewhere, it was about becoming someone. The destination was always your own transformation. You remember the storm, the silence, the lions, the shadow, the surrender, and now it all echoes with purpose. The journey was not meant to make you powerful. It was meant to make you pure. You fall to your knees, not in weakness, but in reverence. The ground beneath you feels sacred because it has been walked by faith. You whisper, "Here I am. Do with me what you will." And heaven answers through peace. The legacy. Days pass, and the world continues spinning, unaware that a shift has occurred. You still live, work, love, laugh, but everything carries new meaning. You no longer chase signs because you have become one. You no longer beg for guidance because your every step is guided. You understand now that miracles are not interruptions, they are reminders. Every breath you take is one. Every moment you forgive instead of fight, believe instead of fear, love instead of retreat, you perform one. You have learned the final truth. Being chosen was never about destiny alone. It was about awareness. You are not waiting for heaven to come. You are revealing it where you stand. The final light. One night, as you stand beneath a sky trembling with stars, you hear the whisper one last time. Well done, faithful soul. You did not run from the storm. You became it. You did not seek the light. You carried it. You close your eyes. The world grows silent. You are no longer afraid of endings because you finally understand they do not exist, only transformations. And as you open your eyes again, the horizon seems endless. The fire within you burns steady, no longer consuming, but illuminating. You have become what you were always meant to be, a living reminder that even in the darkest night, light remembers its way home. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment. If this truth lives inside you, remember, your story is not finished. The chosen never truly end their journey. They evolve, rise, and return to awaken others still sleeping in the dark. So carry this fire, quietly and fiercely. The world needs your light, for the chosen are not born to escape the darkness. They are born to redefine it.